Good evening and welcome to Overtime. There's been an incident in Brazil reminiscent of our own January 6th where, according to The Guardian, several hundred people stormed the Capitol buildings. That this would be for them their Congress, presidential offices, and Supreme Court. At this point, we believe that number is inaccurate. We believe it's closer to 3,000 people stormed the facility. Stormed these buildings. This is according to local reports and various footage that we have. It's hard to tell. The Guardian says at least several hundred. We're hearing several thousand, probably upwards of about 3,000 people. There are reports that police, as you can see here, were either even involved or certainly not stopping. We also have footage of officers actually firing at the crowd. This right here is, we believe that's their Capitol building. So what happened? Well, there was an election, and on, I think it was October 22nd, in the first round of elections, the majority vote went to Jair Bolsonaro, who was the incumbent president. It was actually the first time the incumbent won a majority vote on the first round. However, I shouldn't say majority, sorry, a plurality won the most votes, but still under 50%. So there was a runoff, and in the runoff on the second round of voting, his challenger, Luiz Lula, won on the second round and became president-elect. This enraged a segment of the far right that decided to start protesting and claiming that the election was rigged. Bolsonaro had already been suggesting that there may be a coup d'etat if he was not reelected, suggested that there would be violence. It was always thin and veiled, never outright said it, and upon his loss, he asked their Supreme Court to, on November 22nd, he asked their Supreme Court to look into, stand by one. All right. Sorry, he asked their Supreme Court to look into the election results, and he claimed that there was fraud in a sufficient number of regions. He was actually asking that they believe it or not, that the voting machines be tossed out. The Supreme Court not only disagreed with him, but fined his party $22.9 million. Sorry, I don't know the currency, so the equivalent of about $4.3 million for abuse of process and what they called bad faith litigation, finding absolutely no evidence whatsoever that the election had been rigged and that Lula did not, in fact, win. The former president still claimed that there had been fraud. One of his biggest, actually the single biggest international supporter was, you guessed it, former U.S. President Donald Trump. In fact, Bolsonaro left on the eve of the swearing in of the new president and went to Florida, which I believe is where he currently still is. Lula was sworn in a week ago today, January 1st, and a number of hard right extremists have been protesting. They attempted to bomb the airport. This was an act, I think it was by a single person. It wasn't a huge mob. It appears to have been one individual, but he claimed later that he had hoped that this would inspire a revolution against the new president. Then earlier today, a week after the inauguration, this happened, which you're seeing in the center window here. Again, we believe this is closer to 3,000 people. Again, The Guardian is saying at least hundreds. We believe it's at least thousands, 2,000 to 3,000. Swarmed the presidential building, swarmed their Congress, and did significant damage, we're hearing to their Supreme Court. The current sitting president, Lula, has come out. We believe he's in the process of making a speech right now, or just wrapped up that speech. He has been described as absolutely furious and called this a terrorist attack, and said that this had been fear-mongering by the former president. The current ambassador to Brazil, U.S. ambassador to Brazil, said that he had no doubt that the former president had been orchestrating this from Florida, and that this was in fact a deliberate act planned no less by former President Bolsonaro. So obviously we're going to hear a lot more about this. The ambassador also claimed that Bolsonaro had actually been studying why the January 6th coup in the United States failed. Quote, Bolsonaro and his team have looked very closely at what happened on January 6th, trying to understand why it was that the sitting president, that a sitting president failed in his effort to overturn election results, said the former U.S. ambassador to Brazil, Thomas Shannon. So those are obviously pretty staggering allegations from a former U.S. ambassador against the former president of Brazil. I'm going to check the live chat in a minute. Obviously, if you're an American, this feels awfully familiar and not in a good way. It's profoundly sad to see this happen. It's sad that there's credible allegations that the president involved in this incident took his cues from Trump, and we know that Trump was his strongest international ally. We believe, and there's, again, this was actually before last year's election. It was Mr. Shannon said that he had been studying why January 6th failed, and apparently was attempting to repeat it. This is why you don't call into question elections unless you have actual evidence, and why it's an extraordinarily serious claim and it has to be taken seriously. You can't just... The U.S. has inspired a number of countries, and that's something we brag about so much that I feel a little uncomfortable saying it, because, like, oh, we're the best country in the world, and we've inspired so many countries. But the reality is, we have. We did with this too. This is not one of our prouder moments. I'm going to check the live chat, and probably then have a few remarks and then wrap it up. We believe now it's cleared. At least 50 people have been arrested. We don't know the number of injuries, but we believe at this point it's cleared. Yeah, so it's it's remarkable. This is another far right president refusing to accept the election results, and calling results into question is a difficult thing. I'm going to speak on all of that in just a minute. So let's just sort of catch up with where we are. I'd like to thank everybody. This was another one of those where our Discord was really staying on top of it, and that was a huge help to me because I was unavailable until about an hour ago. So, and by the time I was available, much of this information had already been collated. So thank all of you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's just curious if there's lag. The system here does not indicate any, so we'll see what's going on. We've managed to make some updates to the system recently, so we're hoping that the real. Thank you, Titan. So the currency of Brazil is real. That's what the R would have been for. So perfect. I appreciate that. Thank you. Did damage to the Supreme Court? Shoot, yeah. We don't know if there are any deaths. We don't know injuries. We do have footage. I didn't get it up in here, and it's probably not worth. It's not footage actually. It's really just a picture of an officer firing what looks like a shotgun. It looks to me like it's firing live rounds. He's clearly firing it in the direction of the crowd. We don't know what was going on. The Capitol Police had to deal with fewer than this, and they were more prepared. So it's hard to say what I personally and what we can say about the officers here. It's very hard to repel a crowd like this, and it's obvious to me that they were overwhelmed quickly. Like I said, there were people saying that they were even partaking. I don't know. And I don't even know what that means. Not to be glib, but if a crowd's coming and they're looking like this, and some of them are clearly carrying weapons. It's not the U.S., so they're not all armed. But at any rate, there's part of me like, hey, yeah, let's go. Who are we for today? Yeah. So again, not to be glib, but whatever it takes to survive the situation, I could see that happening. We had that discussion with January 6th. There isn't anything one or two officers are going to be able to do against this crowd, and any attempt to do so is going to get them killed. So we're going to obviously follow this. Like I said, it looks like it's been broken up. For those of you who are just joining us, a large crowd described by The Guardian several hours ago as at least hundreds, but at this point we believe 2,000 to 3,000 people at least stormed the Capitol building, the presidential offices, and the Supreme Court of Brazil. They were protesting the inauguration of Luiz Lula, who was inaugurated 1 week ago. He lost, actually, his first round of voting by a small amount to the incumbent president, Bolsonaro. However, in the second round, he won. Bolsonaro called into question the legitimacy of the vote and said that at least some of the machines had been rigged. He asked their Supreme Court to overturn at least those particular, or to throw out the ballots from those particular machines, which would have given him 51% conveniently. And not only did they refuse to do so, they fined his party for abusive process, and essentially for abusive process. The official charge was arguing in bad faith. Yeah, that's thousands right there. That's not several hundred. That is not several hundred. That's 2,000 easily. Yeah, that's 2,000 at least. So then there was 2 incidents in the last week. One was a bombing of their airport, an attempted bombing of their airport. This looks to have been like a lone right-wing nut job who, when he was interviewed about it later, said that he felt it would spark a revolution, a right-wing revolution in his country. It obviously failed to do so. Having said that, they have now had this, which is, I think you could easily argue, an attempted coup d'etat. If it was for the 6th in the U.S., then I think it is definitely here as well. Right now, Bolsonaro is in Florida, and I don't think that's a coincidence. Trump is his strongest ally outside of his own country. So my guess is he's palling around with Trump. And that's what's going on. This is extraordinarily serious for any number of reasons. Obviously, for the citizens of Brazil, this is extremely serious. The man who has been elected and is now sitting president won the election. And not only has there been no evidence to the contrary, but the claims to the contrary were so obviously fictitious that the people who made them were fined by his own Supreme Court. So I don't see any grounds for this. Having said that, this is what happens when you start calling elections into question. I don't want to say you should never call an election into question. That's utterly insane. yeah, sometimes you probably should, and that's why they're election monitors, to figure out if and when an election should be called into question. There were monitors for this one, and they all said that everything went off just fine. Our election, Trump wanted to call it into question. I think that would have been a bad idea in the first place because he had no evidence. But once his own Department of Justice said, nope, nothing happened. His own Department of Justice investigated it, found absolutely no evidence for the claim, lost 60 cases before the court, various courts, in front of judges, many of whom he put on the bench. They all said no. Being a public servant, you can do it in many ways. You're a public servant if you're in the military. You're a public servant if you're running for office. There's many ways to do it. You can also be a businessman. I don't begrudge businessmen. If you want to go and make money, go ahead and make money. And I think businessmen tend to make this country better. I'm glad that I live in a country that's got businessmen and the opportunity for people to become rich, the opportunity for people to become public servants, the opportunity for people to become scientists, ministers of any religion they choose. I am immensely proud of all of those. But some don't mix and match well. The goals of business are incommensurate with the goals of the President of the United States and of any officer who represents his constituents and is genuinely looking out for their best interests. That's not what you do in business. I see no evidence, none whatsoever, that Trump was even remotely close to a good businessman, but he was a businessman. And if he had any business in the Oval Office, I have no idea what it was. I do know that businesses reward people who think in binary thinking, win at any cost. Do whatever it takes to close the deal, do whatever it takes to beat your opponents, and that's what's rewarded in business. That's what undermines a country if you're a civil servant. And Trump didn't want to be one of the suckers at Arlington National Cemetery, or one of the non-heroes who got shot down over Vietnam and were tortured for 2 years because they refused to let their Admiral Daddy bail their asses out. No, he didn't want to do any of that, and that's fine. That's fine. It's a free country. Do what you want. But you don't go to the presidency and decide you're going to burn down the Constitution and the faith in our own systems just so you can stay in power. That's not how it's done, and for a very good reason. And I honestly expected conservatives to understand that better than the fucking liberals. Clearly my faith was misplaced. No, that's not true. I wish they didn't understand it. People like Mitch McConnell understood it very, very well. They just didn't care because they wanted the power. So now we have a Congress. We are facing a government where, by the way, I'm going to make a prediction. The debt ceiling is going to be a huge problem. We've discussed the debt ceiling in years past. We've discussed what it actually is because most people don't understand it and why it's so important and why you can't even discuss not raising it. You can't even discuss it. The last time we discussed it damaged the U.S. economy. Just talking about it. Go call up your mortgage company and say, listen, I'm thinking of not paying you guys. I might not pay you guys the next couple of months, just FYI, heads up. I'm thinking about it. I'm not saying I won't. I'm just thinking about it. See what that does to your interest rates next time you apply to a loan. We now have a Congress where people who genuinely think we should default on all of our loans, which would be absolutely catastrophic by even the most conservative economist. You have these people in a huge position of power thanks to the deal that was struck with McCarthy in order to get him the speakership. McCarthy has speaker, and a small far-right far-right minority have enough power to bring all business to a grinding halt. I guarantee you we are going to have breaking news when it comes to the debt ceiling and when it comes to the funding of Congress. Funding of Congress is for the next fiscal year, so we've got some time on that, but it will be this year. We'll be facing another government shutdown. You know, Boebert, and Marjorie Taylor Greene and all of these others, where do you think they're going to stand on that? And how much power do you think they have now that they're the reason McCarthy's in power, with all of the rule changes that allow them to just oust him at the drop of a hat? My point is this. You have to have power to legislate. John F. Kennedy, I think, did a pretty good job. I was a fan of Barack Obama. It wasn't everything the liberals had hoped for, but I was a fan. But he wouldn't have been able to do anything if he hadn't gotten power. FDR wouldn't have been able to do anything if he hadn't gotten power. If you don't get the power to legislate, your agenda is worthless. I don't care how good your ideas are. If you can't stay in power, if you can't get elected, your ideas are worthless. So there's legitimacy to the idea that you need to amass power in order to put your ideas forward and do what's best for this country. If you really want to help this country, and if you have the skills to do it, you're going to have to find a way to get power. I get that. And that's always the way it's going to be. But you have to put the country first. And when you lose the election, you walk away. That's it. It's been the rule for 200 years in this country, since the dawn of this country. And when you don't, you set the precedent for this. Tell me they didn't get this idea from January 6th. That's already what our own ambassador to Brazil said. Studying January 6th, wanted to figure out why Trump failed so he could succeed when he pulled the same shit. It's a very thin veneer between civility and absolute chaos. I prefer the civil side. I like being able to go to Starbucks. I like having a car that I can drive and can actually afford to put the gas in. I'd rather not there be a civil war. I think some people should stop fucking around in this country. That's my personal view. Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to check the live chat one more time in case I missed anything. No, I think I got it all. For those of you just joining us, one more final rundown. There was a massive protest, for lack of a better word. It's actually, I think we're going to be calling this an attempted coup. It has all the markings of what we had on January 6th. What appears to be as many as 3,000 people stormed the presidential offices, the Capitol building, or their Congress, and stormed their Supreme Court. There's been a lot of damage to the buildings. At least 50 people have been arrested. We have no word yet on injuries. We do know that the former president is in Florida, but we believe and have heard from several people, including the former ambassador, that he was, while quiet publicly, instrumental in planning this, and this was his attempt to overthrow the country's elected leader. At least that's what we're being told. We don't know that for certain yet, but that's what several sources have told The Guardian and Al Jazeera. We're obviously going to be finding out more. To the best of our understanding, most of this has been dispersed by this point. The president, I believe, is done speaking now, but the president of Brazil has come out. We'll be following this on the Discord. We'll have more information there, so if you want to keep up with it, please do. But this is a double tragedy. This is a tragedy for the people of Brazil, who are now going to have to find a way forward with people who have lost faith in the fundamentals of the only system that so far seems to work. And it's a tragedy because they got this idea from the U.S. We inspired this. And this isn't the last one we're going to have inspired. Thank you all for joining us. And with luck, we won't see you until Monday. We have a patron stream for those of you who are patrons. And if you're not a patron and would like to become one, come find us on the Discord. You can learn more about that. We'll be having it's a private patron hang for anybody who supports us, members of the channel, members of In Time, members of Overtime, anyone who's ever even super chatted. If you've super chatted even once, you're more than welcome. So, come on in and join us for that. Mods are also welcome. That's a contribution. So we will see you on Monday. Tuesday, we will have Mr. 𝐓𝐢𝐦𝐞 back to discuss how to combat extremism. And we'll discuss the rest of the week as we get there. Thank you so much for joining us. Good night.